give me your top 3 draft picks on presidential candidates that are the most qualified to fight against the establishment and have a fighting chance of winning or maybe making progress. Purely draft pick. Who would some of those names be for you?
I think it's too soon to tell.
That's not too soon.
It is too soon
I
to
think
tell.
you're dodging the question.
A little bit.
I think
a little bit.
But here's,
No, I am. Mostly because then somebody's going to say, well, I'm endorsing candidates for president, and I'm not prepared to do that.
Then this is what I would do. Then here's what I would do. Then forget about top 3. Don't rank them, okay? Give names. And you don't have to give them in order. Okay, you know what I'm saying? And I'm being serious with what I mean by give names. I'm not looking for an endorsement.
I know you're not, but that's how these things will be interpreted.
But if you look at it right now, like, okay, we were with DeSantis a week ago at the governor's mansion. 10, 15 of us spent 5 hours together with, himself, Casey, others, and watching to see how he is behind closed doors and, what messaging and all this stuff is being given. We've already publicly announced we'll do a fundraiser at the House for Biden, for Trump, for DeSantis. Come do a fundraiser. We'll bring top 20 of the biggest influencers.
Should bring Bobby in too.
We would gladly bring Bobby in too. Bobby, we're talking right now about doing a podcast with him. I think June 28th, we're doing a live podcast with a couple hundred people with Vivek. I would love to get a Marianne Williamson to maybe debate him and see what that setting will look like. Because if they're not going to, we're going to get them 10, 20, 50 million eyeballs. Yeah. We'll get the eyeballs. So this is not a time for these guys to play big shot thinking those guys are not going to get the eyeballs anymore. But I'm sincerely asking you as somebody that I believe you love America. I firmly believe you love America, and I firmly believe a lot of people relate to you. And I know I've been around business for 20-some years. I know how to dodge questions professionally because you have to do that when you're negotiating, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not trying to corner you. Just give me names and why. Like, I think this person, like, for example, RFK, here's why. DeSantis, here's what, whoever it would be. What would some of those names be?
Here's what I'll tell you. Because, Ron DeSantis and I served together in Congress, but to be quite honest, I don't know him very well. So what I know of him is what I have seen mostly publicly. But I haven't had a chance to sit in the room as you have to actually really get to know him both as a person, but also really to get into some of the more national issues, to include foreign policy that would inform my ability to answer your question. What I will say is that people like Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, Mike Pompeo, and Chris Christie, we're seeing Governor Asa Hutchinson. They are all part of the permanent establishment machine whose foreign policy would be very, very, if not exactly the same, mostly the same as a Hillary Clinton war hawk. So those are the kinds of things that I have picked up on that I'm looking for as these other candidates are out there and they're talking about their positions on issues. And unfortunately, as is always the case, I mean, even though being commander-in-chief is the president's most important and foremost responsibility, the focus on what kinds of decisions they would make as commander-in-chief don't often come up in debates or in forums, and a lot of these presidential candidates don't choose to talk about them. So I'm hoping as you guys have your forums that's something that you would help shine a light on, because it is literally a matter of life and death to know what are the kinds of decisions these people would make. Are they going to put us closer to nuclear war with other nuclear armed countries or not? Because that the future of humanity is on the line.
Tulsi, I totally respect the fact that if you haven't, you're not prepared to make any endorsements, and if you've never really sat down with DeSantis, and it's kind of hard to acknowledge all that. But at the same time, in 2020, you did share the stage with a host of Democrats: Bernie, Biden, Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren, Andrew Yang. He's been on the platform before. Cory Booker, Marianne Williamson, Beto. The list goes on. Of all those names, who do you think you most closely align with or would be a good leader? How about that? I mean, these are people you know.
Sure.
Who did you get along with, even on a personal level? Who do you think would be a good leader of that group?
My answer today would probably be different than it was back then, largely because with everything that we've gone through since I feel like we've almost lived a lifetime from 2020 till now in 2023.
There was this little thing called COVID.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it just changed the world a little bit.
The little thing called COVID, frankly, the proxy war with Russia via Ukraine. I mean, a lot of people's lack of courage, unfortunately, has been exposed. The fact that not a single Democrat has voted against, remember that first $40 billion round of funding to go that kind of brought in the United States involvement in this war against Russia. Not a single Democrat voted against it. I think there were, between the House and Senate, something like 60 or 70 Republicans who voted against, but not a single Democrat had the courage to even just say, let's not rush into this. Let's actually think about what are the second, third, fourth order of consequences that could occur once we bring ourselves into this. What happens when we start to turn on the tap? At what point do we turn it off? The Progressive Caucus in, I think it was November of last year, if you remember, they sent this 30 members of Congress, sent a letter to Joe Biden saying, please exercise diplomacy to negotiate an end to this war, because if it goes on, it will not only continue to create more suffering and death for the people of Ukraine, but it increases the risk of nuclear war. It will increase the negative impacts on our economy, on inflation, on hunger, and all of these things that are facts, that are very real cost of this war. They sent the letter one day. Within 24 hours, they retracted it. It was some bullshit excuse like, a staffer sent out a letter without our approval, which is nonsense, absolute nonsense. We know what happened. They sent out a letter saying how they actually felt, and they got the hammer laid down on them, and unfortunately didn't have the courage to say no. This is bigger than party politics. We as Democrats, they as Democrats, should have the courage to call out your own president. And I would say the same thing for Republicans. So, it is, I have been really disappointed on a foreign policy perspective, but also with, men going into girls' locker rooms and exposing themselves all, and this being okay in the name of this trans ideology and pervasive acceptance of something that is just, dangerous and fantasy, this gender ideology title, like all of these things that are so obvious and common sense that most people see. I can't think of a single elected Democrat in the House or the Senate, a lot of the names that you've mentioned, who've stood up and just said, what the kid says, right? Hey guys, the emperor has no clothes on. Let's just all admit that. It's not happening. And it's really unfortunate. And it's not reflective of where I believe most Democrats are in the country.
So none of those names, no one that you shared a stage with, you would look back and be like, that person is actually qualified. That person is good. They've all been dismissed from class.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.